Hey guys! It's been a little while since I've made a video about Scrabble's undisputed greatest of all time, Nigel Richards. So I've been itching to make another Nigel video for a while, and I have just the right reason today because another absolutely amazing Nigel game was recently uploaded to the database that I'd never seen before. And this game was amazing mostly for its ending, so we're actually only going to be focusing on the ending today, but don't fret, we're still going to have more than enough to talk about in today's video. Now, this game was played back in 2016 between Nigel and another Scrabble legend, longtime top expert and former world champion Mark Nyman. And the game took place at the prestigious Causeway Scrabble Challenge held in Malaysia. It's worth mentioning that this game used the Collins, or International Scrabble Dictionary. Almost all of my videos feature the North American Dictionary, but this game was so amazing, I'm making a rare exception. So you're going to see some words like Aniac and Moop on this board that are not valid in the North American Dictionary, so North American players, just beware of that. Now, Mark has just emptied the bag with his previous play of Larder. He had 3 R's on his last play, so he wanted to get rid of 2 of them and also stop Nigel from bingoing, perhaps from the L in Licenser. And in fact, he succeeded, because had Mark not played there, Nigel would have bingoed with the Collins-only Lavolted from that L, almost certainly winning the game on the spot. So now the question became, without a playable bingo and holding a rack of ADEOTV blank, could Nigel make up 41 points in this endgame? It's worth mentioning that Mark has 6 tiles left, and they're not great. He has 3 E's, an I, an O, and an R, and of course Nigel knows this through his tile tracking as the bag is empty following Mark's last play. Now, at first you might be thinking, Nigel's rack is so much better than Mark's that maybe he can actually make up these 41 points pretty easily. Nigel also has 2 triple word scores he could use to get himself a lot of points, from the C in ENIAC or through the S in Courants. However, if we do a little more math, we actually can realize that Nigel is not going to be able to outscore Mark, at least by normal seeming methods. In fact, if you plug this endgame into the engine Quackle, which before Macondo was recently developed by the Woogles team, was generally accepted to be the best engine out there for solving endgames, Quackle claims that Nigel cannot win in this position, and that his best play is the simple-looking Cove from the C in ENIAC, which allegedly will lose by 3 points for Nigel. And, well, Quackle is completely wrong here on multiple fronts. The first front on which Quackle is flat out wrong is that Nigel only loses by 3 after Cove. He actually loses by a lot more, as I'll show you guys now. If Nigel plays Cove, Mark has a number of winning plays. The most stylish would be Derive through the D of Larder and the V of Vardy, making Id and E. And after this, Nigel's best outplay is Dida, under Quays, making Chi, Ut, and Ah. But here, Nigel doesn't lose by 3, as Quackle claims. Nigel actually loses by 6, 416 to 410. So, not really sure what Quackle is thinking, saying that Cove loses by only 3. But in any case, Cove loses, so we need to go back to the drawing board. What if instead of using the triple in the bottom right, Nigel uses the triple in the middle left, with a play such as Vest for 24 points, which also stops Mark's nice insertion play of Derive we mentioned before? Well, this isn't going to work either, because yes, Mark doesn't have Derive, but now he can just do something like Seer from this C in ENIAC for 18 points. And Mark goes up by 35, Nigel simply cannot get enough points with ADO blank. He does have a very nice play of Aeroid for 21, but that's going to fall short, losing by 8, 408 to 416 when all is said and done. So a play like Vest, not going to work either. Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, Mac, well, Nigel doesn't necessarily have to use one of the triples. Maybe there's another scoring spot elsewhere that actually gives him even more. Fair question. He does in fact have a nice play that doesn't use either triple. He can play the Collins-only Vare, or Vera, which is valid in the North American Dictionary. It doesn't really matter, for 28 points. Let's say he plays Vare over there, and Mark follows up with Derive, as he did in the previous line. The problem is, Nigel is still going to fall short, because he can play now Octad for 21 through the C of ENIAC, but he's going to lose by 6, 410 to 416. So this isn't going to get the job done for him either. And it's always good whenever you see a sequence that doesn't quite work to think about flipping the plays and seeing if that helps. So the next logical step would be, alright, if Vare followed by Octad fell short, is there any merit to playing Octad first? And it turns out there actually is a slight merit, however that merit is not quite enough. Because if Nigel plays octad, Mark can still just play derive for 18. And now Nigel does have a sneaky outplay that scores more than Ver, which would be 25. He can play Vespid for 27, but unfortunately that's only 2 more, and Nigel lost by 6 before, so now instead of losing by 6, he just loses by 4. So closer, but still not quite there. And Nigel does, of course, have several other plays he could make using both of the triple word scores we've already looked at, but it's not too hard to see that they're not going to fare any better than the lines we've already examined. They're all going to lose by somewhere around 6 to 10 points. So I'm not going to go through all of them in detail. I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer if you so wish. But at this point, we can be pretty confident that Nigel is not going to be winning this game, at least by traditional means. And by traditional means, I more or less mean trying to play out in 2 and score as much points as possible, while also ensuring that Mark is only going to get one more turn, and that Nigel will get some bonus points from whatever Mark still has unplayed on his rack. That would be the most logical way for Nigel to go about this endgame. However, we now know that's not going to work, so he's got to try something a bit more unconventional. And the 2 unconventional things that you usually look for in these kind of situations are trying to stick your opponent with a tile or trying to set yourself up for a big play. Now, it's pretty easy to see that Nigel is not going to be sticking Mark with a tile. Mark has a lot of vowels, but it's very difficult to stick a player with a vowel because vowels make a ton of short words. And there are loads of places on this board where Mark can play all of his tiles. So it's very easy to see that there's no way Nigel can make a sequence of plays that's going to prevent Mark from playing one or more of his tiles eventually. So that is not going to work. So if Nigel's going to win this game, he's got to figure out how to set himself up for a big score. And he's got to do the setup in a way that both scores enough points and also that Mark can't block. There are a lot of ways Nigel could easily set himself up. For instance, he could play As for 2, threatening a huge play hooking the V to make Vas on his next turn. However, it's super easy for Mark to block, because he has an E for the columns only EAS, or an R for RAS. So he can just play something like ERE in that spot, blocking easily while scoring 18 points, and Nigel's setup is all for nothing. So Nigel needs not only a setup, but a setup that's going to be difficult or ideally impossible for Mark to block. And that is not easy to do. There appears to be a single play that wins for Nigel in this position. And I already gave you guys a hint that it is a setup, so with that, I'll give you an opportunity if you would like to pause the video and see if you can find this play. If you were able to find it, very, very impressive stuff. I think most people would not find this. However, Nigel Richards is, like I said, the greatest Scrabble player of all time, and he sure did find it. It is a setup. It is not using the S of Courants, though. Setups over there, basically like I just showed, are going to be too easy for Mark to block. It's a setup involving the C of ENIAC. And again, there's a lot of ways Nigel could consider setting himself up there, but a lot of them are too easy to block. For instance, COD, setting up a big play with code, isn't going to work because Mark has ease himself and he can just play something with code for a big score while blocking. So he's got to be more creative. The one winning play is Octa for just 6 points. We looked at the possibility of Nigel playing Octad in that spot earlier. Instead of Octad, his only win is to just play Octa, setting himself up for a massive score on his next turn with something like Vide and Octad, which would score a whopping 57 points. And you might be thinking, okay, well, EA is a word in the International Dictionary, so it's probably not that hard for Mark to block, right? Well, actually it is. Here's the problem. Just dropping an E doesn't help because EE is valid in the International Dictionary and Nigel goes out with Vide anyway. So then the only possibility would be for Mark to play a 2 there. If he plays EE, this is not going to work because Nigel can go out with Vexed through the E, scoring 51 points, and I'll leave you guys to check winning easily. So the only other potentially viable option would be to play ER. But the problem with this play is that while now Nigel doesn't have a super high scoring outplay through that R, he has the Collins only Verd for 60 points saving the blank. And even though Nigel hasn't gone out, it's not like Mark is going to go out either because he's still got 4 vowels, E, E, I, O. His best play here would be Yogi for 18 points, retaking the lead by 1, but now all Nigel has to do is go out literally anywhere with his blank, which is obviously super easy to do. His highest scoring outplay scores 22 points, and wins the game handily. So Mark really has no way to block after Nigel's genius setup of Octa. Anything Mark does to try to block gives Nigel something equally good or even better. There's one other potential block that's worth at least addressing. We've exhausted now all of the blocks Mark could try to make next to the A in Octa. There's no way to extend motific, there's no way to extend tan because there aren't any two other words ending in a C, even in the International Dictionary. The one other way Mark could try to sneakily block is actually extending this EE to make eerie for just 5 points. And the idea is now Nigel can't put that V on the double underscore and play vide because the E gets in the way. However, Nigel could still play eaved for 48 points from the E in eerie, which it's easy to see would be more than enough. Interestingly, eaved would be Nigel's only winning play in this position. If you're playing anyone other than Nigel Richards, maybe you at least play eerie to force him to find that. It's not the easiest 5 to see, but it's Nigel Richards. He's the GOAT. He's obviously going to find it. Eerie, not going to work for Mark. So, going back to the position after Nigel played Octa, Mark simply admitted defeat, saying, all right, Nigel, that's a great setup. There's no effective way for me to block. And Mark's best play here for a point spread, which does matter in Scrabble tournaments, is to simply ignore Nigel's setup completely and play derive, as we looked at in an earlier line, for 18 points. After this, Nigel, of course, went out with vide for 57, and after getting 4 more points from Mark's unplayed E and O, Nigel won this absolute thriller of an endgame 424 to 416, with, again, as far as I can tell, the only winning play in the original position. Octa for 6 points through this C in ENIAC, stopping one short of a triple, setting up a huge outplay on his next turn. Absolutely amazing stuff. Like I said, major kudos to any of my viewers who were able to find that play, even with the hint. Super impressive stuff. And I guess I could say really impressive stuff from Nigel, but really it's just another day at the office for him, and that's what makes this so insane. People often talk about Nigel's word knowledge, and Nigel's word knowledge is unbelievable. He has undisputedly the best word knowledge of all time of any human. It's more or less flawless all the way through the dictionary. I think my word knowledge is pretty good, but let's be real. My word knowledge is nothing compared to Nigel Richards. But what I personally think is equally impressive, or maybe even more impressive about Nigel, is his flawless endgames. It's not easy to learn a huge volume of words, but to me, that's actually less difficult than being as perfect as Nigel is at endgames, even under time pressure and even in super, super complicated positions like this one. The thing is, to be flawless at endgames, you need to know basically all of the words, but beyond that, you also have to have an incredible mastery of board geometry, board vision, and an incredible ability to calculate ahead as you would in chess, and Nigel has all of these. I think I'm a pretty good endgame player. I feel like I'm actually one of the best endgame players out there who is not Nigel Richards. But I play imperfect endgames all the time, and Nigel almost never plays an imperfect endgame, even in games where it only matters for spread. And to me, that is what's so incredible about him. Obviously, I could talk about his word knowledge all day long, but to me, his endgames are even more impressive, as crazy as that sounds. And this is one of many, many examples that I think attest to that. So that's it for this one, guys. Really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more Nigel videos, or you have any other Nigel games in particular you'd like me to cover that haven't been covered, especially on other YouTube channels like Will Anderson's, definitely let me know. I love making videos about Nigel. He's just absolutely incredible to talk about and to analyze as a player. So let me know what you thought of this video, and if you want to see any other Nigel games. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. If you would be so kind as to leave a like or subscribe if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it. And I will see you all soon for the next video. Thanks again for watching, guys, and have a good one. Bye-bye.